Hi, I'm Peoria Mayor Cathy Carlat. Thanks for joining me for another edition of Peoria Pulse. This year, the City of Peoria is 63 years old, and although we may be young for a city, the progress and growth that we have made over the past 6 decades is nothing short of incredible. In 1954, when the City of Peoria was incorporated, Peoria had 1,925 residents and covered 1.2 square miles. 63 years later, we are home to over 172,000 residents and span 178 square miles. With half of our city still left to be built, growth is not only our most dominant challenge, it's also the most exciting transformation on Peoria's horizon. Today, I'm happy to be joined by Peoria's Planning and Zoning Director, Chris Jacques, to talk about how Peoria is shaping our best future. Chris, welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's so great to have you here. You are going to play such a big part in Peoria's future. I would really love for you to tell me, with all of the growth on the horizon, sometimes people say to us, what are you going to do to stop some of that growth? Can you address the stopping growth issue for me?
Sure. It's definitely a challenging notion. So, as you know, the state of Arizona is built on a proud, strong tradition of preservation of property rights. So it's very difficult. And just to illustrate that point, some states have what's called a growth boundary, right? Like Washington or Oregon. And that model, what they do is they constrain growth within that boundary. In our state, the state statute actually prohibits growth boundaries, and it says that we can't have restrictions on the development of state land. So to talk about that a little bit, just to note that the vast majority of property within the city of Peoria is either privately held or it's held by the state trust land. State trust land, it's important to note, is not public land. In fact, state land has the mission to hold land until the value is ripe, whereby then they have auctions, and the proceeds of the sale of state land goes to their underlying beneficiaries, which most of the biggest beneficiaries are public schools. And this is one way they use to fund public schools, is through the sale of state trust land.
Well, I'm really pleased that you brought up state land, because I know that a large portion of land in the city of Peoria, especially the northern part of Peoria, is owned by the state. And it is a common misconception that it's public land, and we both know that it's not, and I wish we did have control over it, but we don't. But so since you brought up schools too, I would like to spend just a minute talking about how the city of Peoria's growth and the schools situation, how those two are impacted and, don't always correlate.
That's a great question, and that's a very important question as we look out and consider growth issues. But I think it's important to note that school districts and cities have very distinct, they're distinct organizations. They have separate missions, they have separate governing bodies, they have separate boundaries, and they have separate revenue sources. So they're distinctly different organizations. And through the state constitution, the state has delegated the responsibilities to site, fund, and construct schools to the school districts. Now, despite that separation, it's very important that we work closely with the school districts. They're part of our community. And in fact, we happen to have 4 school districts within the city of Peoria, although the Peoria Unified is the largest school district within our city. So we work with them on a variety of ways. It's important that they understand where growth is occurring and the rate of growth where it's occurring. So those are several things we do. Not only do we constantly supply them with monthly and quarterly reports on where this growth is occurring, we meet with the school districts quarterly. The school districts are also part of our development review process. And so in that, we will compel the developer to meet with the school district to address any types of capacity or funding questions that come up. And a lot of times what happens is, what results is what's called an impact agreement, whereby the developer might pledge a financial contribution to the school district to help offset capital costs.
Now that's done just directly with the school district.
Correct. The city is not a party to those agreements.
Yes.
That's right.
But the developers, when they come to Peoria, they do know that it is in their best interest to work something out with the school district whenever possible, right?
Absolutely. And it's also important to note that the school district is very much involved in our general plan process that I'm sure we'll talk about. They're not only part of our general plan steering committee, we have Deer Valley and Peoria Unified School District, but they're also very much involved in all the community meetings we're having. So they're we very much have an ongoing conversation with the districts.
Good, and a great relationship, I know, on all
Absolutely.
different kinds of levels. Well, so let's talk about the zoning process for a minute, because when developers come to the City of Peoria, they need to enter into our zoning process, and that's a place where we can compel them to look at Peoria policies, and maybe we can mitigate growth a little bit that way.
That's a great point. And so when developers do come in, we control the type of growth that occurs and the timing of infrastructure. That's really the leverage we have through the development process. So when they come in to talk to us through the zoning process, we have the ability to, we have to ensure that development not only conforms to our general plan and our infrastructure requirements, but also it's really critical in working with the neighborhood that we can find, that we can manage and shape the development in a way that turns out to be most compatible with and in best transition with the neighborhoods around it. And there are several ways we can do this, not only through the density that is, in the end, that is identified, but also through buffering. It might be restrictions on lighting, restrictions on where a trash enclosure goes. It could be restrictions and limitations on where access points occur. So we can do all those things in working with the developer to try to make the development most compatible with the area around it.
And that's very much a public process, isn't it?
Absolutely.
All of the neighbors will be invited to attend and,
Definitely.
and speak their minds about who they want to be their new neighbor, right?
That's right, of course.
Yeah. So we've got zoning to help mitigate growth, but in the end, what is going to happen to help us plan out our best future in the City of Peoria?
I mentioned earlier about the general plan update. I'm very excited about that. And so what a general plan is it serves as the blueprint or the foundational document for the city. And it guides all development and growth decisions throughout the city, typically over a 10-year, 20-year horizon, but beyond that point. We're currently in the middle of a general plan update. And so, you know, one thing to note about general plans is that one thing that's unique in the state of Arizona is that they have to go to public vote at least every 10 years. And I believe we're the only state that still has that process, but we do. And it's a very important one. So a general plan, not only is it the blueprint for growth and development, but it deals with a variety of issues, everything from land use to transportation to economic development, housing. So there's a number of elements or chapters we have to address. And so with this current process that they're in, we've probably 8 months within a 2-year process. And so we know it's very important to engage the citizenry. And one thing I've noted in the last several years with the advent of technology and our smartphones, people access government. I think they provide input very differently maybe than years past. So we're trying to touch all the buttons and get out into the community. We've had 2 rounds of community meetings that we've placed at all areas of the city. We have gone out to what we call pop-up events, where we'll go out to special events and engage our citizens and ask them questions about growth and development. We'll also we have a very active website where we'll put out surveys that we can garner information. So we've been effective at all those different levels of trying to gather input. And this input's very important as we consider the next step, which is to try to shape the way our general plan looks and some of those policies that will guide development down the road.
Yeah, that is so exciting to me, because that is the Peoria we want, one where the people are the ones who tell us how they want our city to look in the long run. And so this is a perfect tool for that. The general plan, as you can see from the map behind us here, the general plan lays out development. It not only takes care of transportation corridors, but it also looks at places that we can maintain open space. And that's a really important part of not only mitigating growth, but also maintaining the strong character of our community. So having all of our citizens involved in this is just tremendous. It's exactly who we want to be as a city.
And if I can, Mayor, I did mention about the active website we have. It's www.planpeoriaaz.com. So if a citizen was to go to that website, they could not only provide comments, they can download and access any flyers or any information that we've developed during the process. They can review comments that have been provided. So really, that's going to be our home base over the next year and a half.
Good, perfect. Thanks for that information, and
bet.
thanks for joining me today,
Of course,
Chris.
thank you very much.
Arizona is a fast-growing state fueled by home building, and growth is inevitable. To reach our full potential, it is the job of the current Peoria leadership to put in place the building blocks that will manage the growth, and we are doing that each and every day. With a diligent eye on planning, we will use the growth to assure Peoria's transformation into its best future. Thank you for joining me today for another edition of Peoria Pulse.